All right. So hopefully that sound is good enough for what it needs to be. I'm actually going to pump it up just a little bit, and then we'll get started here. Okay. So, all right. So first things first, I guess. So you teach accounting, right? What's some of the first things that, or well, how did you get learning communities on your radar? We'll start there.
Yeah, so this semester I'm not only teaching accounting, but I'm also teaching business communication, as well as GBS 205, which is
Okay.
business law, ethics, and regulation.
Okay.
So I met with one of our other faculty members, and she mentioned that learning communities can be a really good thing, especially for those business communication classes and the business law class. Um, One of the things we were talking about was essentially grading, and I have my students do quite a lot of writing. However, I'm not an English teacher.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's not my specialty in any way, shape, or form. Although I did pass the AP for grammar.
It's a place to start, right?
But it's not part of my core competencies. So we were discussing how much writing that they have to do, and she said, "Oh, there's an idea of these things called learning communities, and it's where we can pair you, or where you can be paired with somebody in a complementary discipline."
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess just for short context, I guess learning communities. I usually describe them as like mashup courses, and they're usually between two or three courses, and there's a variety of there's like an on ramp that you can have. Most people, when they hear about them, just hear about the very best practice, which is a fully integrated, fully co-taught. Students in both classes, fully enrolled in both classes, and that whole thing. That's the most common version of a learning community that we have, and that's like the one that's been promoted programmatically at our institution for a while. And so we do a really great job of working with teams to create fully integrated, fully co-taught, fully co-enrolled LCs that where one professor is looking at the due dates, deadlines, projects of the other, and back and forth, and they're kind of creating a semester plan for both courses. So it's really great for students in the sense that it makes, like for instance, if you know you have a teaching partner who has an exam week 4, you don't assign a major project due that week and that kind of thing. So that's one of the really cool things that happens from an academic level. The other benefit, just basic benefit of having that type of fully integrated content is that it takes the idea of learning transfer from FAR transfer metacognitively, which is looking at how students learn and how well they connect outside of the context they learn in, to near transfer, where you're helping them. It's not quite as much of a cognitive load to do the meta work,
Sure.
if that makes sense. So shifting something like transfer from FAR transfer to near transfer for students is a really good step for LCs. And I hear you saying you do a lot of writing, and it could be nice to help to see students maybe engage with that writing in a different way, having that be part of someone else's paired competency.
So right now, my business law classes are fully asynchronous online.
Mm.
So I have to think of a lot of different types of activities that they have to deal with, because I don't get face-to-face time with them. Unfortunately, that means that I'm defaulting in a lot of ways to writing exercises, and that of course leads to lots of grading,
Right.
and lots of different types of assignments that really don't fall within my major core competencies. I'm of course looking at their content. I'm looking for their idea development. I'm looking at their the way that they're expressing themselves, but I'm not circling where commas should be, or
Right.
making other suggestions in ways that maybe an English teacher would be better suited to do that.
Yeah. Well, now I'm trying not to wear. I have to be careful not to wear both hats.
Yeah.
Because I've got the writing professor hat and then the LC hat. But I'll try. I'll actually. It's probably good to do both. So for context, because I don't think I shared this yet. So my experience with learning communities is I started out as a part-time faculty here, moonlighting in 2015 while finishing my PhD. And during that time, someone's like, "We need someone to pair with chemistry." I happened to overhear it because I'm a terrible eavesdropper, ADHD as it is. But that got me involved in a chemistry and writing learning community that we were able to do. And so trying to find ways to let chemistry inform writing and writing inform chemistry, and treating them both as equal kind of partners in the thing. That was the first step. And then I've done pairings with GBS 151, the Intro to Business course, pairings with math in multiple levels, and then Intro to Computer Systems. And so, and every time those partnerships work really well is when we're kind of seeing each other's content as informative to our own and equal to our own. So that's one big key principle that makes it work. And one of the things that does work well with the writing is like you get to focus on the things that you care about, and then also it can be good to have students. Sometimes the benefit is from having it paired with a writing course is that like you as a faculty member, you get to focus on the content. And so and also because they know someone's going to be focusing on some of the other things, how they're making an argument or how they're adhering to the genre norms, or whether it's a sentence level cleanup or whatever, or formatting, APA as it is, whatever it is, like sometimes you get a little higher quality read, which does make your job easier, because grading is nicer when when stuff's easy to read, right? Yeah. And so that's part of the fun.
And I'll give you an example. So I'm teaching business communication course, and we're talking about how to craft business messages effectively. And within the course, it's describing this, certain way to format things, and I'm like, this is a 5-paragraph essay. Like that's if I was in an English class, here within this context it's being described as this, but here I'm going to shift gears, and now I got to take time out of my business course to teach a 5-paragraph essay. Yeah. And I do of course advise them. I say, if you understand how to write a 5-paragraph essay, you will be good forever, because that is like the basis of all persuasive writing, all informative writing. If you can get your 5 paragraphs in and understand what they're supposed to do, then you're going to be successful.
Yeah, it's like any argument with 3 points is going to win over an argument that's just a claim, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and one of the things, so kind of writing hat on for a moment, like one of the things that I get students to do is recognize, and it's use, because a lot of students get like the 5-paragraph model in high school, but then they get so locked into it that they can't necessarily adapt either. And so it's also letting them see, like, in the event that if your business plan requires a larger structure, if you're not doing a timed writing or an 800-900 word paper, thinking of it as 5 chunks or 5 sections, and each of them can have as many paragraphs as needed, but it's still kind of making that 3-pronged argument, or that I've got evidence to support, and so getting to it allows you to have a little more depth of engagement, because they're getting kind of that nuanced expertise in there too. So that's really good. But yeah, it's like when you're kind of like, I need paragraphs.
Well, right. Yeah, some of it is quite as simple as like, can you please present something that's not a wall of text, right? And doesn't have to be, I don't care if it's indented, but like, can we use a carriage return every once in a while?
Yeah.
Of course, then they don't know what a carriage return is.
Yeah, and one of so that's actually a really good point, because when you're in the LC, what's great is that if you learned writing, for instance, a certain way, then you're using the language of how you wrote it, and not necessarily, but because every discipline, like, you've got the idiosyncrasies of a teacher, you've got the knowledge of the discipline, and then you've got like all the other factors that might be in, like, what's the culture of it here too, where the language of something might change. Like, for instance, in writing, depending on who you talk to, you could say structure, organization, or arrangement and mean the same thing. But if one teacher is using arrangement and the other person's using structure, then you don't necessarily have that transfer. And so one of the things that can happen is that you start developing a shared language across the courses, which just helps students anchor and deepen that knowledge no matter what the text is. And even better, like, one of my favorite things about the LCs and teaching in them is, frankly, it works like a professional development for me. And like, I've learned so much about chemistry and examples that like I teach the visual design of the periodic table now, and because it's like I'm not teaching the chemistry, I'm teaching how we encoded information in it, because that's my expertise. And then when we're talking about combustion equations, I'm teaching those as genres of writing. Like there's a structure, and then you have the individual moment or the specific context, that kind of thing. So
I think probably from my limited experience, because I had a fairly small amount of time as an adjunct before becoming an OIO, and then with an eye on looking to how I can develop myself and my skills in the future. This is having a partner is very, it's one of the many forms of mentorship. So if I'm able to work with another instructor at a very close level, that's something that I'm definitely looking for, because for the most part, we have a ton of autonomy as instructors or as professors, and I am designing a lot of my classes from scratch in a way that I'm looking to encode information and deliver information. But if I had somebody within a learning community that's going to be able to give me the type of feedback that a mentor would, and I of course can then provide them feedback based on what I'm seeing from the business community and how my students are receiving that information, I think that could be a really great collaborative environment.
Yeah, it works. So learning communities work great as, it's that old saying, as iron sharpens iron, right? So two people can strengthen each other is the idea. And so there's actually what's interesting is, so this has happened with other partnerships too, but just I'll share from my experiences and isn't hopefully inspiration. But so me and the chemistry faculty here, we were running our LC for a couple semesters, and next to us in the same office over in Agave was a math professor, and so she kept overhearing us, and we would like shoot the breeze and whatever. And so then something came up that I wasn't sure of on the math side that was happening in chemistry, because they have to do stoichiometry and they have these other things the same way you would, like, you've got all the formulas in accounting and all that fun stuff, right? So it's like, I was trying to understand the math side of it, and so I asked a question, and that drew her in, and then we started having these like triple conversations, and so that led to us developing math LCs, and then being able to talk about how, like, we ended up presenting at a national conference a couple times as a trifecta, kind of, Triforce, to quote Zelda. Yeah. So so it becomes this really nice way to build community, not just for students and not just for their learning, but for faculty learning too.
Sure.
Yeah. And so
especially cross-disciplinary, because while we're walking through the halls or whatnot, we do get to see each other. But I'm not going to have a ton of opportunity to work with our ceramics staff, or whatnot. One of my teaching principles really relates to around community, and anything about building community is really part of my general core, and obviously, community is in the name of learning communities.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, like, because of the nature of like where you're at right now with like you're in an OYO, a 1-year only contract, but most people in that want a full-time job too, like long term. And so that's one of the challenges with learning communities, at least the way we do it here, is that it's one of those things that if you want it the fully integrated version, that is usually kind of the best practice, you have to have a year of planning. So, like, for instance, just for institutional context, like if you were wanting to schedule this spring 25, like you're supposed to put in a like for a fully integrated LC that's like on the books and the students can enroll in right away and all that, with another class, like that's got to be in like end of February or early March, usually of the previous spring semester. So like we're coming up on our next fall deadline, first week of October. So that is a challenge when you have this short term. And for instance, you're not the only one. I just talked with an OIO in psychology. They're kind of visiting from Glendale, and they're like, "What's this learning communities thing?" And because they were trying to get something over that they could take back too. So one of the challenges is the long-term trajectory it takes, but there is this on-ramp, and so I'll kind of lay out some of the possible options, because you've still got most of this semester, all the next semester, and then hopefully there will be a full-time job there too. But either way, like no matter what, some of the things we do is like a first step. We taught there's a soft linked, or there's a equivalent of like a common intellectual experience kind of co-curricular thing. And so that means you find someone who you don't mind spending a little bit of time with, and you say, when could we, is there ever a time where your expertise could fit my class, or my expertise could fit your class? And do our schedules work that we could do like a professor swap of classes, where you teach my class this week and I teach your class this week from that lens. Like that's one of the easiest connections, because the only people it requires to change schedules is the teachers, and and it's not like more work or less work. You're just teaching a new class. It is better if you can have both teachers in the classroom. So actually the easiest version is if you have the exact same schedule as another teacher, and you guys can schedule time where your classes are together.
Oh, so
and like
if you both have 10 o'clock classes.
Yeah. And then you basically you each kind of take 35 minutes or whatever it is, depending on how long your class is. You each take the half hour, and then, but you can plan it out so that it's a little bit of back and forth. It's more conversational. It's like you're riffing off of each other or heckling each other about each other's content. Like sometimes it's fun. In one class, one of the teachers I've taught with was like, this is why my class is the best of all our disciplines, because this discipline requires me, this topic for this, and this discipline does this. And then I get to come in and heckle and say, yeah, but none of them could communicate without writing. So it becomes a fun like back and forth, and it sometimes engages students even more, even if it's just one class. So that's an easy kind of soft entry into learning communities, is taking a look at the schedule and saying, who has a schedule similar to mine that's anywhere close to my content, and sending that like cold email to say, or if you don't know anybody, right? Sending that cold email to say, hey, we've got overlapping schedules. Here's some of the things I teach. I'd love to just spend 15 minutes and brainstorm what this might look like. And that's an option. So that would be like the first step. The other is, it's possible, and this is where we get into sometimes the long-term planning does matter. It's harder to do this with short-term because if it involves scheduling. But you can do an option that I call a pocket LC. It's kind of like what we do with honors, where you set a separate section aside for like 5 students out of your 25, and just see if you can get some overlapping enrollment in 2 classes to see if any of that sticks. But that way you also don't risk like the course not making and having to shuffle your schedule. So that's a soft version. There's another scale up that, again, long-term planning, this is one because it has to go through scheduling, where you plan to have a learning community that is what's called linked. And so that's where all the students in it are of the same cohort. They're enrolled in both classes equally. And so you're going to have all the same students. Yeah. And so then you kind of speak back and forth, but you don't do the co-teaching side, and you don't necessarily have to do like an equal, like a shared grade. You can choose to you can just try and align your schedules for these co-enrolled students so that it's a little smoother for them. And
it seems like that may be a nice a co-enrollment option, may be fairly nice, especially for this particular situation where you may have people coming in person for like an English 102, but then they'd be asynchronous.
Yeah.
For the other flip side.
That's right. I forgot about that component.
And my biggest thing, one of my biggest concerns with any asynchronous class is connection. I'm here because I want to be connected. I want to be connected to the staff. I want to be connected to faculty. I want to be connected to the students. And connection is a real challenge for asynchronous. So if there's a co-teaching situation or a learning community situation where I can visit the students that I have in an asynchronous class while they're on campus in a synchronous class, and be able to get to know them better and be able to draw a better connection, I really can see that as a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, we have an LC with reading and English 101 or 102. We've got a couple of them, and they've done like one of them as a hybrid class and one of them as an asynchronous. And for the hybrid class, both professors show up for that. And so it gives the students who are, it gives them a place where they're seeing the same students in multiple contexts. So their brains are already kind of stretching beyond like that whole idea of like you've got a threshold and you lose memory as you cross it. So you already have that. So like going to Canvas in multiple shells, or sometimes teachers will do a shared Canvas shell actually, especially if they're fully integrated. If they're not fully integrated, there's some variety that can happen. But either way, getting that kind of, even if it's just once a week touch base where you can ask questions in person and then have an asynchronous curriculum that you're tied to, like it kind of forces the micro office hours before and after class in a good way, so that students who might have just floated through an asynchronous kind of submitting work and doing their thing and getting into a routine of submit work and then take the break and whatever it is, it gets them, like, they're physically present, you get to check in on them, and all of that. And so sometimes students will ask questions in person that they won't online because they're nervous about, because they have this fear of the professor kind of thing. I think ASU put a video out a few years ago that was like a fear of my professor's office hours or something. It was hilarious, but it's worth looking up for fun. But yeah, so as far as that goes, so that especially crossing modalities can be a lot of fun. We haven't explored that too much just because we're still kind of adjusting to what learning communities look like post-COVID and across multiple modalities. So we've got a few, but there is room for us to grow in that way. And it's a great way to kind of anchor students who would traditionally be mostly online. So we mentioned there's the shared, the linked model where you aren't co-teaching at the same time necessarily, and you can do we're just going to align our schedules to make students have an easier path, but you can also do that fully linked cohort. Since you have all the same students, you can plan 1 or 2 major assignments. There's actually, even before we get that far and before we get to Pocket LCs, kind of back in the realm of like simple professor swap, you can do a shared assignment that your classes, that you kind of have one class do one part for and the other class do another part for. So as an example, I do in my math and writing learning community, we do math for kids books, and they create kids books to take over to do service learning with 3rd graders. And one of the things that I toyed with for a while, and I talked to Lewis in Art, Mendoza, I was like, if you've got any of your art classes and you think they'd want, if we give them here's the concept for the book, would they be willing to design a cover for it? Mm-hmm. So that it's almost like my students were being like the creative director or like the hiring, the here's our concept, what can you get? Yeah. And so then what is the art, getting them used to trying to catch someone else's vision. And so kind of crossing the streams. That's something that doesn't require co-enrollment, but does integrate the content and help them go, oh, there are other people on campus that aren't just in this class, and we can interact, So sometimes breaking those soft barriers a little bit can be good.
Yeah, those are definitely some really good ideas. I think my brain's going to go a little, well, I have certain dreams and hopes for different things that are both cross-discipline, but also, even just within our department.
Yeah.
Because I could see, some certain things happening there. But, you could very easily have, if we have one of our marketing courses, and, we have people who are great with ideas and great with thoughts, but not necessarily great with a pen.
Yeah.
Who is doing even just a singular cross assignment with, somebody who's more on the art side and uses that portion of their brain a little bit better. And now we can get people to work on describing, on encoding and decoding.
Yeah.
And interpreting. So yeah, I could definitely see a couple things like that happening. I just got to think of a couple ways to do it.
Well, and kind of brainstorming, the other thing that can work with kind of drilling down into some of the specific things you said, thinking about what mashups could go course-wise. If you're in the spring and those students, say you've got a course with no prerequisites, so it's possible they haven't even had English 101, if you got with an English 102 class, or sometimes we have a tech writing class in the spring, if you got with one of those classes and said, my students need to create a business plan, can your students give them feedback, peer-to-peer feedback? Because in writing research, there's research that says giving, like, it's better to give than receive.
Yeah.
And so students actually improve their writing more when they give feedback, based on a number of research studies over the last 10, 15 years. 20, sorry, I lose track of time after
It's
COVID.
a real bend of their critical thinking skills.
Yeah, and you're taking something a student's producing that's not for your context, and you have to, and part of the training, for instance, for my class is like, how do you give good feedback that doesn't just sound like critique, that isn't just, this is terrible, fix it. And so part of their training for being rhetorically savvy and effective is learning how to give meaningful feedback in a way that doesn't make someone feel just terrible and doesn't make you feel like a jerk, but it's still honest. And so that can be a meaningful trade-off. If you've got my students are producing business plans, they're going to write it, and then we're going to tell them there's a real audience, which in and of itself transforms the amount of energy that students put into it when you get beyond the audience of the professor, the audience of one. And so just having the knowledge that another student's going to look at it, even more another student potentially in another class, even if there's no name on it, that for FERPA reasons, that crossover can get you better quality and get them more engaged in the project.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because that's sort of what I'm doing tomorrow. I still have to design, part of the class. It's a brand new class for me, and I'm pretty much designing it, with some of the Bravo stuff, but designing it from the ground up. And it's a hybrid accelerated, so it's an 8 week. I say my terminology is accelerated when it's 8 week, but everyone else just says 8 week. Because I want to exemplify like how ridiculous it is to smash this into this, and then only let me see them for 1 day a week. But we're dealing with creating routine business messages, and there's a bunch that we're covering, or that the text is covering. But what I hear so much is what are the soft skills? Businesses want soft skills. They want people who know how to sit in a room and look somebody in the eye and shake their hand and like be dressed appropriately and understand the different courtesies and etiquette, because they feel that they can train on the technical work, which is probably true.
Right.
So I'm actually going to have them write thank you notes.
Nice. Very,
very simple, handwritten thank you note. What's the format? Because the format of a thank you note is very similar to almost all the other routine stuff. Here's my thesis. Here's my evidence, or my reasoning. Here's a conclusion. Thank you, done. It just happens to be on a small note card. But we're also going to talk about some following up to talk about sort of the emotion piece of it too, that comes into play. But I'm asking them to bring a subject for somebody that they're legitimately going to write it to, and with their address, and they're going to write the note, and I'm going to mail it.
It does add stakes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this isn't a whatever, I'm just gonna half-ass this. This is something that's gonna go in the mail. It actually is going to have meaning and have reason. And then tonight, I got a bunch of grading to do, but tonight I'm gonna write them thank you notes.
To your students?
Yeah, from me to them.
That's a great form of feedback.
And then, but I'm not telling, I'm not putting it in, putting everything in yet, so that they can see, because I don't want them to expect it. So they'll give me their thank you note, and I will give them their personalized thank you note. I gotta try to remember or think of something for everybody. But then but the assignment will be for tomorrow night is to post on the discussion board. How did you feel when you were sending? How did you feel when you received something? So that they can try to bridge that gap from like, oh, this is just like some routine dumb thing, no, I actually was able to think about like gratitude and appreciation and have an emotion tied to this activity, and then maybe that'll assist them as they move forward. Yeah,
being really aware, and like from a writing rhetoric perspective, like one of the big values is that I lean into is the empathy side. Like in a technical writing context, technical communication, there's this design thinking process that engineers use, that some business marketing uses, and
engineers don't have any emotions. Anyway, so.
Well, there's a reason that the first step of this is
I should have had you pause on that first.
Well, all in jest. is empathy. Like the design thinking process starts with empathy. And even if you're a logic thinker, like empathizing says, what's my user doing with it? What's my user need? How is it going to make them feel or experience this product, whatever it is? And so,
we've covered that empathy piece big time.
So, we're making better humans. It's a gen ed thing,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's one of the gen eds, make better humans, right? Across the board. It's for all classes. But so that's really cool. Like I geek out about that. I love the idea. We have the stuff on this campus. I think that Trisha and Renee do. Renee Rood and Trisha Sindel Arrington, like they do a lot the Week of Gratitude stuff, and so it's really cool. So lean into that when time comes. Maybe that's an opportunity for a co-curricular I think they do it in the spring, somewhere in February. But yeah, we'll so there's that. Only because I have to run to another meeting, I want to take some time and show you a little bit of how we engage with the data side when we're thinking about LCs. So there's a couple tools we can use, and I'm going to switch screens here, or I'm going to just basically turn something on here. So we're going to do this, and I'm just going to stretch it a little bit, and we'll see how well that goes. But the first thing we do, let me jump over to that window. So there are a couple different dashboards we can use when we're trying to figure out what we're doing. So we have field of interest and class rank. And so this is if we're looking at a specific field of interest. So for you, do you know what field of interest is? It behavioral science?
It's entrepreneurship.
Oh, I'm sorry, business. Yeah, I space monkeyed. Business, entrepreneurship, etc. So these tell us the most commonly enrolled courses for spring 2024, so last semester, for this group, for the people in this field of interest. And so we can look and go, okay, what are in spring, we see these combinations. So of course there's the accounting 111, that's GBS 151, econ 211. Those are like core courses. And this could be people in their first semester, in their third semester, in their second semester. So this is all students and what they enrolled in. So this is a starting place to say, where might there be some meaningful courses for that degree as a place to start? And so if I'm looking for business majors, what are the things I see that aren't business classes? English 102, CIS 105, Intro to Computer Science, MAT 151. That's one thing we can do. So that's one place we would go if we're trying to be data-driven.
That would be really interesting because in my 111 class this semester, I am hitting Microsoft Excel so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And, the big thing is so that they can, part of it so they can be prepared for 105. And I wasn't really thinking about interdiscipline.
Sorry, one second.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Going long. Sorry, I could be there a bit late. I have a faculty mentor I'm supposed to be working with.
Okay.
But say that last part again. Sorry for being a jerk.
Well, I'm hitting like Microsoft Excel really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Excel is key it's key for business people, but especially for accounting people.
Yeah.
Data manipulation and whatnot. And CIS 105 is a big piece of database management, Microsoft Excel, those sort of things.
All the other office technologies, yeah.
So if I was able to generate find a partner there to be able to say, hey, look,
Yeah.
But, like in my mind, I'm thinking the full-on co-teach stuff.
Yeah.
You've brought up
so many options up to
other,
that. Yeah.
Other different versions.
So when they get to the Excel section, like it could be a reinforcement or a professor swap where you don't have to necessarily teach Excel, you can co-teach it. So let's do this. This is another one. So the other one was field of interest. This is specific course. So tell me one of the courses that codes that you actually do.
GBS 233.
GBS 233. Sometimes the upper end is a little less enrolled, so
or 205.
Okay, so we'll start with 233. So actually GBS 233 and 205. So that's an in the discipline LC potential. Yeah. Now there's also, like you said, like modality might matter. So if we said we only wanted in person, we can watch how the enrollment changes here. There's no in-person overlap actually. So that's good to know. Versus if we said we want the online only versions. So most of these are online and some of these are versus live online. But that means we've got people who are enrolled in both of these classes, and so what's your cap usually for that course?
25.
Okay, so yeah, we've got a couple different sections there that we could, like, that's usually 80 is a good number if we just want one set of 25, and then we can direct traffic through marketing and stuff like that sometimes, or reaching out to majors, or early in the semester if you set up an LC, or if you plan a learning community ahead of time. If you are looking at enrollment, say you set it up for this spring. Come November, we could look and say who's already enrolled in both of these classes. Hey, guy, and then send them a targeted message to say, if you're interested in these classes, you can get them aligned in this LC by enrolling in these specific sections. There is a little bit of like office politics that you want to be aware of, that sometimes people consider that funneling to targeted sections. It's still better for students. It's a high impact practice, so it's still good. But it's good to be aware that that's a potential thing. But so let's look at, 233, aside from GBS, we have pairs with accounting that are still high. Econ 211 still high. CIS is at the 60 range, and that's only online. So let's say all, because we could get, like you said, one of those combinations. And that's for this GBS, which is probably a higher level course, I imagine. But we still have good enrollments if we wanted enough for a class. Like I've had an LC run when there was originally only 40 students in it. That's not always the best or most optimal. Having 100 or 200 students is usually better. But for instance, just as a comparison, I was going to do 151 and then do 205 just so you can compare like the entry level version. So if we do GBS 151 versus CIS,
it's like the same thing.
It's 900 instead of 80, right? And if we wanted an in-person version, it's much less. So that's interesting. So we drop from 900 supposedly to 20. So that's fun. But that cuts out all hybrids too. But we do have mass overlap with some of these other classes with GS 151. So that means that there's enough for more than just a few. But let's check your 205. Let's see, for that one's got some pretty good ones, especially in the online modality. So accounting 111 has some potential, 270. Our CS 105, 220, and if you're interested in potential online or hybrids, that might have some in there. We could go and check Find a Class. So this is if we're trying to plan long-term for a fully integrated version. Now 205 is not usually the one in the fall. Like that's our fall numbers. That's important to know.
Yeah.
Like that's fall 24. If we wanted to scroll back, we can actually look, and if we were looking toward the spring, we could say, well, in the spring, we've got English 102 right there.
Yeah.
And English 102, CIS 105, all of those have like about the same. So what actually shows me is there's probably what I would call a tripod of courses where you could probably get all the same students in all three courses and just give them a block schedule, and then they go pick an elective. And that actually is even better because they get like triple reinforcement. Yeah. Even if it's not perfectly planned, the connection to other students. And so we're considering leaning into something called suggested sections for fields of interest or for specific degree plans, where it's like we're not necessarily building whole learning communities that you have to. Yeah, it's like we're saying if you're interested, you might all consider going to these sections as a starting place, sure. And then at least half the class like you're going to see in multiple sections. Yeah. But those groupings, like there's a lot of potential in the spring for that course. So those are some of the starter tools. I'm trying to remember if the other thing is, one thing I'll do if for instance, we're trying to build Find a Class. I will go to Find a Class. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to do, if you're trying to say who might be interested in a professor swap or something like that, and all I want to do is, I know I'm on campus, like if you're teaching asynchronous, right? Mm-hmm. I know I'm on campus Mondays. I'm going to see if I can find someone who's on, I can either try and look at student demographics and say, are any of my students in the same class? Like, are there 3 people who, if I go to, maybe they've got the same class I could visit. But I could also just go in here and say, okay, on Monday, we're going to say starting at, this is interesting how they've got the time set up.
That is odd.
Starting at, maybe there's, okay, I don't know. I think that's, 1 p.m. I don't know why it's not giving me morning. But I can say, okay, Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. to any time, because that's when I'm here. I want to see just any class, and that has a Tuesday schedule. And so I can go in here and I can look and say, okay, and did I click CGC? I did. So I can go in here and say, okay, what are classes or people who are in there? And if maybe for you were saying like, maybe I want to look at English 102 for the spring. See if I can find someone who might be willing to play ball or pair that I could jump in on, right? And so look and say, either do I know any of these people or, do their schedules work for me? And then I could reach out and say, well, their schedule works if I wanted to go and like just boost business or see if they'd be willing, if I did something for them, could they do something in my online or produce, or could we, and like, is this making sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
No.
So even using something like Find a Class to find other professors that might have an overlapping schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Now for learning communities, like on Friday is our learning communities meeting. So the learning communities committee meeting. If you're welcome to show up, anybody's welcome. All faculty are welcome, and staff and everybody. But one of the things that, and I'll go ahead and get rid of this now. So one of the things that I see. You gotta slide back. No, mine's messed up too because I messed it up. One of the things that can be useful, like we give the schedules for the next semester and the current semester if possible ahead of time so that people can try and plan possible professor swaps or co-curriculars or things like that. If you only have asynchronous teaching, you have a lot of flexibility because it's really like it's more what can you offer them that they'll be able to do some sort of crossover. But because your class is asynchronous, there's a lot of flexibility for the other person too. And so even just trying to do those soft connections, those where it gets, and this is really kind of stepping a little bit beyond learning communities to honestly the Guided Pathways book. So the Guided Pathways book talks about I can't remember. It's like the 2015 one. I've just spaced on the actual title of it, but it's what inspired our Guided Pathways. But about 2/3 of the way through, it talks about the web of connection that students have and why it's so important to get them seeing other professors, seeing writing center tutors, seeing library faculty, getting connected to student life and all of that. So anytime you can draw a connection that strengthens that web of support that students know they have and makes it real to them, like that's going to be good. And it's kind of at its most stretched thing for learning communities. That's one of it. So
Cool. Awesome.
But I know we're out of time, and so thanks for talking through, asking questions, taking the time out of your day. But yeah.